Welcome everyone to this Settle In Live session. My name is Barb Graham and I'm with Catholic Charities, Refugee and Immigration Services in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In today's session, we will be providing you with an overview of the asylum process in the United States. We will discuss what asylum is, how to submit an asylum claim, and what to expect after you apply. Please remember, when you're commenting during this live session, do not share any personal or confidential information as we are public-facing. But first, let's talk a little bit about humanitarian parole. Many people who fled Afghanistan just prior and after the Taliban takeover in August of 2001 came to the United States on something called humanitarian parole. Humanitarian parole allows someone to come to the United States, but it does not allow someone to stay in the United States forever. Asylum and temporary protected status are ways to allow someone to stay in the United States. Asylum might be a way for an Afghan who's afraid to go back to Afghanistan to stay in the United States. People who receive asylum can apply for lawful permanent residency 1 year after they receive asylum. Before proceeding with an application for asylum, it is really important to know that Afghan nationals in the United States may now request temporary protected status, which will allow them to remain in the United States until November 20th, 2023, and that could be extended. For more information on TPS, visit the Settle In page to watch our previous live event. Those with parole or TPS do not have to apply for asylum right away if they maintain their status, because being in the United States with parole or temporary protected status is considered an exceptional circumstance that will qualify for an exception to the rule that says that you must apply for asylum within 1 year of entering the United States. The process of applying for asylum is confusing and it can seem overwhelming. Also, a rushed application could lead to errors that will negatively impact your case. That's why it's important that you find a legal professional to help you. Once you make statements about your asylum claim, you can't change them. Therefore, you want to know what you say in your application and at your asylum interview, because United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, will look for specific details when they process your asylum claim. So what is asylum? First, let's discuss the definition of asylum in the United States. Asylum is a way for someone to stay in the United States once they are here if they are afraid of persecution in their home country. To get asylum, you must show that 1. You have a reasonable fear of persecution in your home country. 2. Someone wants to persecute you for one of 5 reasons: your race, your religion, your nationality, your political opinion, or your particular social group. 3. Your fear of persecution is well-founded. And 4. You can't safely live in another part of your country. Now let's talk a little about each of those parts of an asylum claim. So first, what is persecution? To be granted asylum, you must show that you have a well-founded fear of persecution. This means that you are afraid of persecution while you are in your home country. Persecution is difficult to define and to reduce to simple rules. For example, some courts have said that unless an act is severe enough to threaten someone's life or freedom, it is not considered persecution. But other courts have also defined persecution based on a combined effect of several acts. You must show that your fear of persecution is well-founded and with good reason. You can do that in one of 2 ways. First, you can show that you have suffered persecution in the past. Or second, you can show that you have at least a 10% chance of being persecuted in the future. The immigration judge or the asylum officer will try to determine how likely you are to be persecuted based on the details of your story. This is why it is so important to clearly describe why you are afraid to go back to your country. Organize your story and use specific facts about what happened to you. Don't use vague statements or generalities. So what are the types of persecution? A well-founded fear of persecution can be based on your race, your religion, your nationality, your political opinion, or particular social group. Being afraid of persecution or punishment alone is not enough. It is not enough to show someone that wants to hurt you or would even kill you. You will not get asylum unless you show that the reason someone wants to hurt you is because of your race, your religion, your nationality, your political opinion, or something called a particular social group. The persecution can also be imputed. Imputed means that the person or people who want to hurt you think that you are of that race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or particular social group, even if you are not. For example, you may have no political opinion, but if your persecutor thinks that you support his political rival, then they might persecute you, based on a characteristic that you don't even have. Two reasons, religion and race, are pretty straightforward. However, it's more difficult to define political opinion, nationality, and particular social group. Political opinion, to prove that you have persecution based on a political opinion, it can't be just that your opinion differs from those people in power. Your political opinion must be one that those in power want to stop. Many people disagree with political opinions of their government, but that doesn't always mean that their government wants to persecute them. Nationality. Nationality can be a little confusing to understand. Nationality and citizenship are not the same thing, even though they are very similar. Nationality means that you can enjoy the protection of the government, but that your participation is limited. For example, you often cannot vote, whereas citizenship allows you to fully participate in government by voting and running for office. Let's talk about particular social group. Particular social group is harder to understand. Especially, it wasn't defined before making it a part of the immigration law. Instead, courts have created a definition of particular social group as they revised and reviews cases. Particular social group involves people who share a characteristic that is so important to who they are that they either cannot or should not have to change it. Some typical examples of particular social group include gender, marital status, sexual orientation, or being a member of a certain family. But it can't protect all kinds of different people. So what happens when do I apply? You must apply for asylum within 1 year of coming to the United States. However, there are exceptions for people who are in the United States with another lawful status, such as parole or temporary protected status. If you came here as a student or on another type of visa, or have parole or temporary protected status, then you must apply for asylum within a reasonable amount of time after going out of that status, or that status expires. Generally, 6 months is considered a reasonable time frame. In addition, there are some other exceptions to the 1-year filing deadline. If something changes in your home country or your personal circumstances, which would affect your asylum claim, then you may still be able to apply beyond the 1-year deadline. So who is included in your application for asylum? You may include your spouse, your unmarried children under the age of 21, and they will be included if they are inside of the United States. If you and your spouse have all the requirements needed for asylum, then you can both apply. Whichever of you is approved first can then complete the forms for the other spouse. This gives you 2 chances of having an approved claim. So what are some reasons that I cannot get asylum? There are several reasons why your asylum application could be denied. For example, you are involved in persecuting someone else because of their race, their religion, their nationality, their membership in a particular social group, or their political opinion. You could be denied if you have been convicted of a serious crime without a right to appeal. If you have any criminal history, you should speak to a lawyer before submitting an asylum application. You could be denied if you are a danger to the community of the United States. If, for example, you have a history of drug abuse, of violent behavior, or drunk driving, you may be considered a danger to the community. You could be denied if immigration thinks that you have committed a serious, non-political crime outside of the United States. You could be denied if immigration thinks that you are a danger to the security of the United States. For example, you would be considered a security threat if you were associated with a group that the United States considers a terrorist organization. You could be denied if before coming to the United States, you lived in another country that allowed you to stay and to work. The law and the rules on this can be really confusing, so it's good to find an immigration lawyer who can help you and guide you through the process of applying for asylum. How to prepare for an asylum claim. Next, we want to talk a little bit about preparing an asylum claim. The following information is intended only to give you an idea of what is involved with the asylum application and the entire process of applying for asylum, so you'll know what to expect. It should not be considered legal advice, and we strongly encourage you to talk to an immigration attorney before submitting an asylum application. The first thing is to file a form called an I-589. The form you need to file, the 589, you can follow these links in order to find the form and its instructions, as well as the mailing address. Take your time completing this form and be as accurate as you can be. It will ask you for a lot of details and information. This form does not give you enough room, however, to answer some of your questions. You will want to write a separate statement to accompany your form so that you can explain in detail all of the reasons you fear persecution. Take your time writing this statement. Find quiet time to organize your thoughts. Use your own words and don't try to sound like a lawyer. It's important that immigration understand your fear. Use concrete examples. Don't use generalities or talk about things that you don't know firsthand. Don't be worried about using bad language if you are repeating things that you heard or repeating threats that someone made to you. You need to paint the picture so that someone who hasn't met you will understand exactly how you feel and why you feel that way. You may have to write your statement and then put it aside for a couple of days, and then come back to it again so that when you've had a chance to think, that you can include more information as you go through it. As you go through this process, make sure that immigration has your current address. You can change your address on the internet through this link. After you submit your application, you will receive a notice stating that immigration has received your application for asylum. Next, you'll receive a notice for an appointment to have your fingerprints taken and a digital scan of your face. This is called your biometrics appointment. Make sure that you go to this biometrics appointment or inform the immigration office as soon as possible if you need to request a different appointment time. Next, you'll receive a notice for an interview with an asylum officer. If you miss this interview, or if you cannot make this interview, you must notify the asylum office as soon as possible to request a new interview. However, you should avoid missing or postponing an interview if you at all can. What will happen during your interview? Before you sit down for the interview, the asylum office will have you take an oath or make a promise to be honest in all that you say. Everything you say during your interview will be under what's called the penalty of perjury. That means if they find out that you lied, you can be sentenced to jail or you can be deported. The officer will make any needed changes, such as listing a new address or listing a new job. Then the officer will go through your story and ask you questions about your asylum claim. This is to review the facts of your case. It is not the officer's job to be mean to you. They might go through your written statement if you have one. It is important that the officer really understands what happened to you. Therefore, you need to communicate with the asylum officer and to communicate very clearly. Tell the officer if you don't understand a question that the officer asks, or if you don't understand a word that they use. You don't want to say something that you don't mean. For example, one of our clients answered yes when the asylum officer asked if she intended to commit polygamy. The client had no intent to commit polygamy, but she didn't know what the word polygamy meant. Finally, the officer is going to ask you a list of questions that review the reasons that the United States will not grant someone asylum. Some of them may seem insulting to you, but the asylum officer must ask every one of these questions. The asylum officer does not necessarily think that these questions personally apply to you, but it is their job to check. At the end of your interview, you will be asked to sign off on any changes that the officer made to your asylum application. You will not receive a decision on your asylum application that day. Later, you might get a decision in the mail, or they might ask you to come back to the asylum office to pick up your decision. The asylum office should provide an interpreter by telephone, but if one is not available, they may let you bring your own interpreter to the interview. In that case, be sure to bring someone who you're comfortable with and someone who you're comfortable with hearing what has happened to you. Make sure that they will not be embarrassed to hear and translate all of the details. Your interpreter should be an adult and must speak both English and your native language well enough to tell your story. Your interpreter cannot be your legal representative. It is important that the officer clearly understands your story. The interpreter must have enough vocabulary to translate your fear of persecution into English. Well, if your asylum is approved, then you are now what is called an asylee. Sometimes your approval might be pending the final security checks, but you will know that the hardest part of the process is over. After 1 year of being an asylee, you will be eligible to apply for lawful permanent residency. If your affirmative asylum claim is not approved, then you will go back to the status you had before applying, such as parolee or TPS, if that status has not yet expired. If you have no current immigration status, you will receive what is called a referral to the immigration court. This usually means that the asylum office will put you into deportation and you must appear before an immigration judge. In this case, now you will need to prepare a defensive asylum hearing. This does not necessarily mean that you have to panic. It is not uncommon for the asylum office to refer you to the immigration court. The judge may still approve the asylum claim. A good immigration attorney can guide you through this process. Thank you for coming today, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for the Settle It Live event. We covered a lot of information. You can return to this recording after the event to review the information again. We also really encourage you to follow the Settle In Facebook page for the latest information you need to know as you adjust to your life in the United States.
Welcome everyone to this live session. My name is Jenny and I work with CORE. We'll be covering the Afghan Placement and Assistance Program in the U.S. Many of you have asked about the services available to you through this program, so we're going to take some time today to share a bit more information with you. Please do remember when commenting during this live session not to share any personal or confidential information as we are public-facing. The Afghan Placement and Assistance, or APA, is a program that offers services to Afghans who entered the U.S. and were granted humanitarian parole. The U.S. government is providing short-term funding to resettlement agencies in the U.S. in order to provide APA services. So you might be wondering, what are these services? Or how much money will I receive? Or perhaps you've heard your friends and your family talking about the services that they've received. Let me share with you that the U.S. government funding for the APA program covers the basic needs that you and your family may have. Do keep in mind, though, the services will not cover all of your needs. The U.S. government has asked resettlement agencies to provide services in order to fulfill the APA program requirements. Resettlement agencies are bound to certain rules of the government, and they cannot act outside of the APA rules and guidelines. Resettlement agencies employ staff, who are often called caseworkers or case managers, who directly provide these required services. We'll cover more about the resettlement agency in another session, so don't worry too much about that right now. The APA services include a wide range of topics. They include airport pickup, appropriate housing, food and weather-appropriate clothing, access to healthcare and healthcare insurance, enrolling children in school, offering cultural orientation, and offering access to other government assistance enrollment. Services may look slightly different for you depending on your circumstances. For example, one APA service is supporting school enrollment for children. Some resettlement agencies are still working from home due to the COVID pandemic, so this might mean that your caseworker will contact you by phone or WhatsApp or another messaging application to request the necessary information in order to enroll your children into school. Other resettlement agencies may start to work from the office soon. In this case, your caseworker may visit your home in person, or they might request that you visit the office to provide this information. So just keep in mind, and please try to remember, services may look a bit different for you depending on your circumstances. Now you might be asking, how long do APA services last? How long can I expect to receive the support? And it's a great question. The APA services are available for 30 to 90 days. As we discussed before, these services will help cover basic needs of you and your family, but they are not going to cover all of your needs. The goal for you is to obtain employment quickly to cover you and your family's needs. Please take note that while the APA services only last 30 to 90 days, some of your other government assistance will last a bit longer. For example, your caseworker will support you in getting access to appropriate healthcare and healthcare insurance. The initial insurance will be government funded with little cost to you, and this insurance will last up to 8 months depending on your individual circumstances. Things like household income, the size of your family, and many, many other factors will determine how long your government assistance will last. But please do remember and keep in mind, some government assistance, such as your initial healthcare insurance, is available for a longer period of time than the initial APA services. So to wrap up, the APA program offers services in order to meet the basic needs of you and your family. The resettlement agencies receive a limited amount of funding in order to arrange things like basic housing for you, make sure you have food supplies in your home, and prepare seasonally appropriate clothing like winter jackets and warm hats as needed. Do take note that there is no additional large amounts of money that you will receive from the resettlement agency. The U.S. government provides the funding to the resettlement agencies, and those agencies have staff, caseworkers or case managers who then provide services to meet your basic needs. Now we would like to answer some of your questions. While we won't have time to answer all questions, our team will be monitoring the comments and answering them as quickly as possible. Please do remember when commenting during this live session not to share any personal or confidential information as we are public facing. And you can still continue to send us direct messages with any sensitive questions that may have confidential information. Okay, so the first question we have here is, when does my resettlement agency provide me with welcome money? Great question. As we discussed a little bit earlier, resettlement agencies do not provide large amounts of money or welcome money. This is unfortunately a rumor and a myth. Resettlement agencies receive a limited amount of funding to meet basic needs and provide services. The APA program does, however, provide a one-time small amount of pocket money, about $20 to $50 per person. The next question we have here says, it has been more than 4 months. We're waiting for our departure flights from the military base. Why is it taking so long to resettle us in our selected city in the U.S.? Yes, good question. I can see that you've been waiting for a very long time. Let me say that the resettlement agencies are working with all of their local offices in different towns across the country to find the best community for you and your family. They will work hard to prepare for your arrival and to be ready to help you find housing, access to healthcare and schools, and connect to services, including preparing for and finding employment, access to government assistance, and referrals to legal service providers to provide you with immigration support. You should also be aware that you will likely be placed in temporary lodgings upon arrival in your new community, while more permanent housing is arranged. So please do know that as soon as your destination community has the capacity to be able to welcome you and your family, you will be able to travel there to begin your new lives in the U.S. Okay, our next question here. I am one of the Afghan evacuees. My question is, what other assistance are available and that we are eligible to receive? Great question. I'm so glad that you asked. Afghans who were granted humanitarian parole are eligible for the APA program that we've been discussing today. You can receive assistance through your resettlement agency for at least 30 days and up to 90 days. Remember, this program may be limited and may depend on your family size, age of family members, income, and the resettlement agency. Providing housing, household necessary items, food and clothing, cultural orientation, helping you and your family members with job search and job placement, enrolling children in school, and access to healthcare and health insurance are some examples of the APA services that you'll receive through your resettlement agency. one more question here. How can we get help with an employment program for obtaining a CDL? Most importantly, the training school for trucks. This is a great question. And I know the CDL is referring to a very specific driving license for very large trucks. So you will be able to work once you receive your eligibility documents, such as your employment authorization document, also referred to as EAD, and Social Security card. So employment authorization document and Social Security card. Your resettlement agency will provide support in your job search, or they'll refer you to another agency to support you with resume building, interview preparation, job search, and actual job interviews. Receiving a CDL, a very special type of driving license, requires some studying and practice. You may ask your resettlement agency for support with this. They may be able to help you directly or, again, refer you to another agency that can offer you help. Great question. So another really good question here. What happens when the APA program ends after the 30 to 90 days? And thank you so much for this important question. This is a really good point. So the goal is for adults in the household to obtain employment as soon as possible to cover you and your family's needs. Since the APA program is only available for a short period of time, earning an income will be the best way to cover your housing and other basic needs. Okay, and I think we have time for one more question here. What if I am unable to find a job as quickly as I would like to? Finding a job can definitely be a challenge in the U.S. However, the resettlement agency will provide support in your job search or in referring you to another agency that can support you. For those unable to find work immediately, there is limited government assistance that can temporarily support some of your needs. These types of assistance will vary based on your household income, the number of people in your household, and many other factors. So please do speak with your resettlement agency for details. It's also important to remember that your first job in the U.S. may not be your favorite job, but your first job in the U.S. will give you good work experience, practice with speaking English, and income to cover your household costs. Work experience and improved English abilities will then help you find better jobs in the future. Those are all of the questions we have time for today. I want to thank you again for joining us for today's live session on the APA program services. We appreciate all of your questions and hope we were able to offer you some new information. We will be offering more live sessions, so please do watch for our future posts. And for any questions that were not answered today, you may send us a private message and one of our team will get back to you as soon as they can.